Monkey D. Luffy, without a doubt, is one of the best written leads in anime history, and personally, my #1 favorite character of all time. Most of the time, people don't really care about the main character on the anime because mostly the lead character always doing too much, or maybe too kind, or maybe just not cool enough compared to the supporting character. But Luffy has his own charm. What makes him special is not about the power, the fights, or even the dream of becoming Pirate King, but it's about how he makes his decision, his flaws, how he as a kid tries to grow to be a good captain, and the people around him reveal the deeper story Oda's been building all along. I've been a One Piece fan since I was a kid, and Oda is really good at maintaining the story, so the older we get, the deeper the stories go. So as adults, we can still enjoy, or perhaps we appreciate this story more because we understand the world better. One Piece world building has so many layers, and the best part of it, it's like a mirror of the real world we live in. And in this story, Oda invites us to go on an adventure through Luffy's story. Luffy on the surface is a goofy character who acts on impulse, but when you look closer, he's actually one of the most emotionally intelligent characters. He can read people in ways that go beyond logic. For some reason, Luffy is really good at judging people in a good way. He doesn't listen to what people say, he watches what they do. He doesn't follow rules for the sake of rules, he chooses what feels right to him in the moment, even if it breaks every system around him. You don't realize just how profound Oda's writing style really is. It's all rooted in a personal code that's way more radical and way more human than people give him credit for. Luffy as a character is designed to draw out the best and worst in the people around him. In fact, that's one of Oda's smartest writing choices. Luffy doesn't just stand out because of who he is, but because of how he changes the people he meets. And of course, his carefree personality means he'll believe almost anything, and it makes him look stupid as hell. But when it comes to the people who really matter, the ones he's deciding to trust with his life, he doesn't just rely on words. That's where he becomes sharp. He waits for actions, not promises. The first thing we must remember is when we first met Luffy. This introduction is very sudden, and we know absolutely nothing about Luffy's background. As the main character, Luffy appears very impulsive and unaware of his surroundings, not understanding the meaning of the word tense in that situation. But the most striking point is that he confidently declares he will become the Pirate King. Mind you, he has just emerged from a barrel in the middle of the ocean. Then another striking point is that he is very honest, completely straightforward. He tells Kobe to his face that he doesn't like Kobe because of Kobe's lack of confidence and his crybaby tendencies. Unlike typical main characters, here Luffy seems a bit insensitive or even cruel for saying that to Kobe. But for some reason, we laugh along with him. He has his own charm, with his optimism. And let's think back to Roronoa Zoro's introduction. Kobe warns Luffy about how dangerous Zoro supposedly is, painting him like some kind of monster, terrible person and stuff. But Luffy doesn't care. If he says he wants to see it himself, he'll do it. He ignores the gossip and waits to see Zoro's actions. Luffy judges Zoro based on the onigiri moment. Luffy hears Zoro's story from Rika's version. The point here is that Luffy already thinks that 1, Zoro is a cool dude, and 2, Zoro is kind. So he just wants Zoro on his crew. What makes Luffy 100% sure about Zoro is when he still eats the onigiri on the ground. Somehow, Zoro respects the gift from Rika even though it's dirty. And the most important thing is that Zoro also has a dream, ambition, to become the greatest swordsman. And the moment Zoro proves his real nature, Luffy makes his decision. Things like this happens all the time. Do you guys still remember what happened to Shushu the dog? Luffy in that moment understands what's important for Shushu. The thing is, Luffy respects whatever it is that is important to that character. Sometimes it's about their treasure, sometimes it's about their secret, or something like that. You can see it in Amazon Lily when he protects the Gorgon sisters from their past. But in Orange Town, we experience the first Oda magic for the very first time through Shushu's treasure. And in this moment as well, he meets Nami for the first time. And you can tell Luffy doesn't really like Nami at the first meeting. I think Luffy just knows that she's not honest. But because of Luffy helping Shushu, for the first time Nami sees that not all pirates are evil. At least Luffy wasn't. This pattern continues with Usopp and also with Sanji. Luffy judges Usopp just because he's the good guy who wants to help Kaya and he's funny, and Luffy judges Sanji based on when Sanji basically helps Gin with his food and also that he has a dream. I would say Sanji is more like the Zoro one but sadder. And when Nami's turn came, Oda gave us one of the most unforgettable arcs in Shonen, at least the first one. The show portrays Nami like a traitor, playing both sides, deceiving her own village, tricking the Straw Hats, and almost everyone saw her as an enemy. But Luffy doesn't believe that. Luffy knows that Nami is hiding something. He knows Nami is a good person because before that, in Orange Town, she instinctively wanted to save Luffy from Buggy's cannon. So when Nojiko tries to make them understand about Nami's position, Luffy didn't care basically. He didn't care what Nami told him to his face, he was just waiting for the truth to show itself. And then, that moment when Nami stabs her own shoulder, trying to carve away Arlong's mark, that's Luffy's answer. Nami's actions were the answer Luffy had been waiting. What followed was one of the most iconic breakdowns in anime history. Nami pushed Luffy away, lashed out, threw up every defense mechanism she had left, until finally she said the word, "Help me." And without hesitation, he gave her the simplest, most powerful response. He put his hat on her head and stepped forward to fight for her. That's the beauty of Luffy as character. He doesn't need an explanation. He doesn't need the full story. He just needs to see who you really are. And once he does, he'll fight for you with everything he has. That's why his crew feels so authentic. Every Straw Hat Pirates member had to reveal themselves in a moment of pressure, whether they wanted to or not. And that's how Luffy builds trust. It's not about what people say they'll do, it's about what they actually want to do. Remember what happened with Chopper. He wants to travel and become a pirate, but he's insecure. Luffy, with his stubbornness, sees that. He knows Chopper wants to adventure, so he just says, "Shut up and let's go." And remember what happened with Vivi. In Alabasta, a lot of things happen, but the moment that shows Luffy as a character is when Luffy and Vivi fight, and he asks Vivi, "What do you actually want?" Luffy pushes people to have guts. Speak what you want, do what you want. The dynamic between Luffy and Vivi is also one of my favorites. And one of the best moments is when Vivi said to Luffy, "You are not suited to be a captain." And Luffy at that moment understands it and learns from it. So at this point, Luffy is still a kid who is still learning to become a leader. He's still not a good captain at this point, but you'll see the growth. And the growth becomes clearer in Water 7, one of my favorite arcs in the series. The fight between Luffy and Usopp is still one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire series. Up to this point, Luffy's role was clear. He's the captain who always rushes, the one who carries the crew through impossible odds. But when the Going Merry, the ship that meant everything to Usopp, was declared beyond saving, the cracks finally showed. Usopp lashed out at Luffy. At this point, we see that Luffy is doing his best as a captain, but how he communicates with Usopp is not good enough. On the other hand, we understand what Usopp feels, but at the same time, we know that Luffy is on the right side. This situation throws Luffy into a type of conflict he had no idea how to handle, an emotional conflict with his own family. The main problem is that Usopp feels weak, useless, and left behind. And Luffy, to stay true to being a captain, had to make the most painful choice of his life, standing against his own crew. But here's the genius of Oda's writing. That moment doesn't just define Luffy, it also defines the other crew members, with Zoro being one of the main highlights. When the dust settles, it's Zoro who steps in as vice captain, making it clear that the crew can't afford to follow a captain who bends on discipline, even for someone he truly cares about. In this moment, Luffy as a character shows how he gives them the space to matter. And that balance, between Luffy's emotional chaos and Zoro's unshakable resolve, is what makes the Straw Hats feel like a real family, not just a team carried by their captain. Maybe some of us have forgotten that in this arc, Luffy as a captain is still new. He's still 17 years old, and he faces big problems all at once. The Merry is dying, Robin is missing, money is robbed, and Usopp leaves the crew. I think the tension between the crew is at its highest here, and we see a lot of growth among the crew. That's why this arc is one of my favorites. I would say that this is an S-tier arc. And we come to the Enia's lobby. At this moment, Luffy just wants an answer from Robin. But throughout the story, Robin always says that she wants to die. First in Alabasta, and second in this arc. Robin constantly says that she does not belong with the Straw Hats. She even never calls them by their name. But at the same time, she tries to help them as well. The first one is in Alabasta, when Luffy lost against Crocodile in the first part. The second one is when she surrendered to the CP9 so the Straw Hats could go safely. Luffy understands very well that Robin wants something. That's why Luffy said, "Now I understand who Robin's enemy is." And he said that Robin has to say, "I want to live." Like before, Luffy wants them to say what they really want. And after that, like the Nami arc, he will fight for you to the fullest. After that chaotic arc, post-Water 7 and everything, they're back together with their new ship, Frankie, and after that with Brook. And just when you think he's found his rhythm again, Sabaody Archipelago tears everything apart once more. One by one, his crew is ripped away, and for the first time, Luffy is powerless. Watching him collapse to his knees, screaming in despair, was brutal. We saw what he really is without his crew. But Oda doesn't let him bounce back with a quick reunion. Instead, he isolates him, and every missing Straw Hat leaves a hole in the story. Luffy gets sick, and you instantly think of Chopper. He starves, and it reminds you of Sanji. He gets lost like a total idiot, and suddenly you're wishing Nami was there. Even his carelessness makes you miss Zoro, the one who usually scolds him. When the news of Ace's execution and Whitebeard's looming war breaks, Luffy has no idea how to process the bigger picture, and that's where we feel Robin's absence. She always puts chaos into context for Luffy. When he tries to escape the island, he slaps together a pathetic raft that collapses instantly, and all you can think is he really needs Frankie. And even when he shares food with the women of Amazon Lily, there's no Brook to sing a song. But still, as a character, we've come to understand what Luffy is really like. Even in his situation, he's still thinking about others, like the girls that turn into stone, or even the Gorgon sisters. And again, he doesn't care about your background. When Boa Hancock says that she is a former slave, she feels inferior. She was afraid that Luffy would look down on her and her sisters. But no, Luffy doesn't care. He feels that friends are equals. That's the brilliance of this arc. It shows how important the Straw Hat and how consistent Luffy's judgment is as a character. After Ace dies, after 490 episodes, finally we get Luffy's backstory. Behind that giant smile, we finally understand something about him. Luffy is actually one of the loneliest characters in the series. In some of the episodes, he says to Ace and Sabo that he has nobody. Garp just sent him to the mountain bandits, and everyone he knows, like Makino and others, is far from him. So turns out that underneath all of that impulse and optimism, he is someone who desperately wants connection. From the very beginning, you can see it in how quickly he looks for allies. The thing about Luffy is that, yes, he's ambitious, but his dream is never about just him. Becoming Pirate King isn't about gold or power. It's about being free enough to protect the people he cares about. Every step of his journey is shaped by that need for companionship. He wants to shoulder people's burdens. He wants to build his own family. And through it all, one word keeps driving him: freedom. That's been his compass from the very beginning. His dream of becoming Pirate King isn't about treasure or ruling the seas. To Luffy, Pirate King just means one thing: being the freest person alive. You see it in the way he makes choices. When Rayleigh offers to reveal the secret of the One Piece, Luffy gets angry at Usopp for even asking for that, because if someone else hands him the answer, then it's not his journey anymore. Basically, he doesn't like spoilers. He'd rather struggle and find it himself than live under someone else's script. And the way he treats other people is the same thing. When thousands of warriors begged to serve under him after Dressrosa, he turned them down, because for him, he didn't want to stand above them. He wanted allies, not subordinates. For Luffy, relationships are about equality, not control. Everywhere he goes, he spreads that freedom. He breaks Arlong's grip on Nami's village. He frees Alabasta from Crocodile's corruption. He shatters Doflamingo's control over Dressrosa. Luffy doesn't conquer, he liberates. He wants them to be free enough to live for themselves. And you see it again and again in the next arc. The thing about Luffy is, he will only help people that he cares about. He's not trying to be the hero, the world star or something. It just so happens that the conflicts Luffy faces always come from the authorities, whether it's a kingdom or the world government. He's not trying to burn the world down, he's trying to live in it without chains. It blows my mind that people say One Piece isn't political. The story always goes there and goes deeper. For example, Luffy stands for freedom, he wants to do whatever he wants, but he also respects equality, even with the kings or queens that he meets. For Luffy, they are equals. That's why he never calls them King A or Queen B. Luffy's worldview is actually pretty close to anarchism, but not the version people usually picture. Mind you guys that anarchism is not chaos, destruction, or lawlessness. At its core, anarchism is about rejecting unnecessary authority, valuing freedom, and treating people as equals. That's exactly how Luffy lives. People often confuse anarchism with vandalism. They're two different things. So when someone says One Piece isn't political, you know they've never really watched or read it. They're too busy counting power levels and fight scenes to see what it's actually about. Luffy's belief is lived out in every choice he makes. I will be free, and I will also fight for the freedom of my friends. And that's why Luffy might be one of the most radical and most human characters ever written. One of the things that makes Luffy such a powerful character is the way Oda places him in a world that feels alive without him. The One Piece world doesn't pause and wait for Luffy to show up. Wars break out, kingdoms rise and fall, and legends move in the background. We only see it all through his perspective, but That's what makes it feel so real. It's like the actual world we live in. You keep moving on your own story, and life also goes on everywhere else. And in the middle of that massive, chaotic world, Luffy shines because of how he chooses to live. He's goofy, reckless, sometimes painfully dumb. But he's also free, loyal, and deeply human. He doesn't just chase a dream, he drags others along with him and makes their dreams possible too. And that is why he's my #1 favorite character of all time. If I'm wrong about any of this, tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how you see Luffy as a character. And let me know which character we should break down next. If you liked this kind of video, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching. Seriously.